Your sensors are correct. Do not adjust your heading. You've discovered the Omega Particle, streaming to the Alpha Quadrant and beyond. Here's your host, the Anchorman of the Federation, the Doctor of Dilithium. This is Jonathan Wiegand.
Welcome to the Omega Particle Podcast. We are back on Deep Space Nine, and I am feeling fine. The day is finally here, and we are removing the famous Move Along Home Alamarine episode. In this episode, I'm sure every DS9 fan has an opinion on it. Some absolutely loathe the episode and consider it the worst of all 179 Deep Space Nine episodes. And on the other hand, some fans consider it, it's alright. I don't know if there is a fan out there that absolutely loves this episode. I'm sure there might be dozens of you out there.
Oh, stop booing. There's nothing wrong with it. There are dozens of us. Dozens!
I just haven't met any of the numerous dozens yet. I'm not doing this, Luna. Okay, I'll do it. Luna, our producer / intern, everybody. So if you do love this episode, please DM us on Instagram because I'd like to know you're real. And we have an Inside the Office bet going on. See if anybody actually does love this episode. Yes, this is one of the most campiest episodes of DS9 in all of Star Trek. And I read one comment a few years ago that really kind of stuck along with this episode. And that was, it's not a bad episode of Star Trek. It's just a bad episode of DS9. And if you haven't watched it yet, please do. It's kind of like a rite of passage almost for all of Star Trek fans. It reminds me of the sexy grandma candle with Beverly Crusher in The Next Generation. One of those episodes. You just kind of have to experience it, you know? I'm not going to say, okay, this is not going to be an entire episode and review of just dumping on this episode like a seagull on the beach here. We're going to have a little behind-the-scenes knowledge about why maybe this is a terrible episode. It could be for budget reasons, could be for script reasons, and was it doomed from the start? Maybe, we'll see. And also, we've, through our expertise and top-notch research ability, uncovered where the infamous Alamarine scene came from, and might be the whole redeeming part of this whole poop shoot, so we'll see that. But before we get started, please remember to like, review, and subscribe to wherever you listen to in the Alpha Quadrant. It helps the podcast a lot. It really gets us out there, so much appreciation for that. And Luna, without further ado, let's kick it. Hey there, OPP listeners. Are you ready to go? Most likely boldly go where no one's gone before. We have an absolutely awesome opportunity with you today, and that is with our Nubeo Star Trek limited edition watches. And it's just not any watch, you may say. Be like, well, doesn't it tell the time? Yes, it does. But it's a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece, designed for true Star Trek enthusiasts. Now, it's such a masterpiece, you probably want to hang it on the wall right next to your autographed pictures from the delightful cast of your favorite Star Trek series. And there's only 800 of these, so please rush and sign up at nubeo.com to get notified, because these watches are only going to be sold for a limited time starting on July 26th. And if you're interested, please reach out to me through DM, email, pigeon carrier, whatever. I can give you a great discount code on these, so please check it out. Let me know. And Luna, now let's finally get into the episode. Yeah, I'm still getting used to it. I think it's fine. I mean, ads are cool, man. It pays the bills, but not really, because it's not that much money. Anyway, are we going to cut that? We might cut that. So, synopsis of Move Along Home. If you have not watched the episode, or if you've kind of forgotten it, this is perfect time for you. The first contact from this race called the Wadi race from the Gamma Quadrant kind of surprises Sisko when they arrive on the station, and instead of wanting to go through the full ranks of first contact and yada yada yada, boring, they are only interested in games. And so, well, before we get into that, so side note, as the episode's opening, Bashir loses his uniform, and I think it's purely because they don't have the budget for that many dress uniforms. Again, this is only like episode 8, so they're like, just say he forgot it. And then, Kira doesn't need one because she's Bajoran militia or the Bajoran provisional government, so she doesn't need one. But it was just like, okay, clearly was a budget reason for that. And the Wadi leader, again, they just want games, they want to play. Of course, Quark agrees to meet the leader. His name's Farlow, and they don't really have anything to come out with these like random sticks and crazy juices. And Quark's like, well, that doesn't do me any good. And then they bring out like a bag of gems, and Quark's like, all right, we have something we can work with. And the aliens quickly learn the rules of Dabo, and then they start beating the house and starting making a lot of money. And Quark instructs one of his employees to cheat, tilt the table in their favor. The Wadi realize this and that they've been duped, and it's like, hey, Quark, you're going to have to play some of our games. And they kind of are nefarious in their attitude and their tone, like, oh, we're going to punish this guy. We're going to make him play one of our games. Speaking of learning new games, I feel like every friend group has that one person that is just obsessed with board games. And then whenever you get together, they're like, okay, let's take 45 minutes. We're going to explain this new board game. And then everybody is going to learn it and then get really competitive about it. It's one of the joys I have when I get together with some lifelong friends is we learn a new board game. Sometimes it's about steampunk balloons, and other times it's Back to the Future, so you never know what you're going to get, and that's always an enjoyable part. But I'm going down a rabbit hole here. So anyway, the Wadi offers a proposition. In order to kind of smooth things over here and win some fabulous prizes, Quark has to play an honest game of Chula. Now, what is Chula, you ask? It is something very, very dumb. And the rules are, you are required to learn as you play. Yeah. So they don't explain the rules. They just you jump into it. It's like this chutes and ladders type of thing. Well, it's called Chula, which means chutes and ladders. Yep. That's what the writers did. They're like, let's combine chutes and ladders into Chula, and that'll be the name of the game. Yep. This is still DS9, one of the greatest sci-fi series of all time, and they're still getting their feet wet. So give them a little grace here. But at the same time, Cisco wakes not in his quarters, but on this floor of this alien room, and it's kind of like, what the heck, man? And then whenever I watch this episode, I'm always like, well, at least they put him in his uniform. Because what if he sleeps naked? Then he's walking around naked. That'd be humiliating. And then they give him a tricorder and they outset him. So this, first off, I'm always taken back by this because they're asleep and all of a sudden they're dressed and they have their equipment with them. And how would the Wadi know that they need? Anyway, but moving on. So to make a long story short, Cisco and his senior staff have been transported into the game. What they encounter and where they go is completely controlled by Quark on the outside. Unknown to either party, the rules are never explained again, but they have free will, it seems, and to solve things as they go on their own, while Quark just simply rolls the dice. It's a fun game, not knowing any of the rules, potentially killing your close friends and work colleagues, whatever. Odo discovers that all 4 officers are missing, and then Quark slowly realizes that the 4 playing pieces he's using in the game represent the 4 people taken. And whether or not you enjoy this episode, from this point forward, it's going to heavily rely on whether you can stand the Wadi kind of Tao Fu Manchu nonsense that comes out. It's just a lot of random verbs and screaming and... Well, speaking of screaming, Alexander Siddig, who plays Bashir, wakes up on this alien floor and just starts screaming. terribly, very bad acting, screaming. And then, all of a sudden, these dignified actors are now singing children's songs and playing hopscotch. It is just absolute chaos in this game. Seriously, if you want to watch this episode, what the heck is Bashir doing? He woke up in a room, he didn't recognize it, and then he was like, do you know what? I'm having a nightmare, so I'm just going to throw up my hands, flail around the wall, close his eyes, and then scream in this terrible bad acting scream. So, I mean, what are you doing, man? Season 1 Bashir is baffling to me. And, well, let's not go down that rabbit hole, stay on focus, but even Kira is just the same way. Like, they're very in their compartments right now in Season 1. Kira is very angry, extremely angry all the time, and she's at this point where that is her entire personality. She's the Bajoran administrator, and she's like, this is the one I signed up for, and I'm angry, and she eventually learns, this is Starfleet, you're going to have silly things happen, especially on a weekly basis, ironically. And I'll stop the rabbit hole about characters and commenting on that, because you all have heard and me talk about this multiple times, but let's move along to the rest of the episode and the rest of the game. See what I did there? But anyway, Fallow tells Quark that his winnings will be greater if he uses a shortcut, though this will increase the risk to the game pieces. And at first, Quark is choosing the safer route. Again, this are his friends and colleagues. Well, I wouldn't say friends, but these are colleagues, and doesn't want anything bad to happen. But then he realizes that a quick end to the game may be wiser if he just skips a level. So a little bit riskier, but the game will end earlier. And eventually, Bashir disappears. Dax is injured in the game, and they reappear along with Sisko and Kira when Quark eventually loses. Odo reveals to Sisko, hey, that Quark's cheating led to this and pretty much responsible for this whole perceived issue and danger. And Quark doesn't really care because he's more interested in franchising this new game with the Wadi. Don't worry, that's the last time we ever see the sweet mullets of the Wadi. They never come back in any way, shape, or form. And that's okay. I'm not complaining. My review of this episode, and before I get into it, like many Trek series, Deep Space Nine had a little bit of a rough start. Now that, the next generation has proven that Star Trek could be molded, into a lot of multiple different series and still be successful, DS9 promised a different take in this familiar world. The thing is, no one really knew what this take exactly was yet. We're a very far cry from the brilliance of the episode In a Pale Moonlight. And we're still at the stage where they thought Sisko shaving his head would be too confusing for audiences. Legitimately, too confusing for audience to see him play this like cop for a number of years on a show. And they said, well, he can't shave his head because then people will think he's Spencer or whatever his name was on this cop show. However, he did punch Q 3 episodes ago, so we all know that Sisko's a badass. But Move Along Home is considered one of the worst Star Trek episodes ever. And I don't think it quite deserves that reputation. I think it's very juvenile. I think it's very childish and silly. And not in the way of a cartoon or like, haha, this is for children. It's just juvenile in the sense that we know Deep Space Nine can do better. That this is a step down in writing, step down in quality. It's kind of like, man, you could do better than that, This is an era in Star Trek where a lot of people that worked on the show still had very high standards. TNG high standards, should I say. Even some of the people who worked on this episode consider it just a absolute stinker. Ronald D. Moore watched this episode before joining the writing staff, and he says in an interview, I wondered if everyone lost their damn minds. Director David Carson said the episode was disappointing. Avery Brooks eloquently stated, it was no favorite of mine. However, Armin Shimmerman, who plays Quark, said, in its own cracked way, it's an okay show. Don't get me wrong, this episode was nominated for an Emmy for hairstyling, so that is something. We'll take it. And as you can see when you watch the episode, There's this Fu Manchu type of mullet look that they go with, like very long Joe Dirt sideburns and forehead tattoos and glittery robes. It reminds me of, again, Joe Dirt meets this Elton John meets Dumbledore. It's all thrown in there. And in a way, that's the beauty of Star Trek, is that there's this exploration of new cultures, meeting of new ideas, the vast wonder of discovery as seeing different worlds come together and prove we're more alike than we are apart. Then on the one hand, first new alien species they've met at the station, and that is just very deeply disappointing. It's supposed to be this grand new, oh my gosh, they came from the other side of the Gamma Quadrant. Who are they? They're explorers like us. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. And the moment they come on, they're immediately looking for slot machines, which is a very kind of funny, like, oh wow, okay, thing to ask for and to do. But I feel like it was a very letdown. It was the first contact, they quote unquote rolled out the red carpet, but then again, they kind of didn't, especially as the show progresses. It's just very, again, budget constraints didn't allow the show to do what it could have done. I feel like for the Wadi, coming to this Deep Space Nine was just whatever. It was just a normal Tuesday to them. They were more interested in, again, getting some sweet Dabo action more than anything. And I meant what I said. I don't think it ranks as one of the worst episodes of Trek ever, but I do agree it's not great. There's a lot of early season 1 kinks that they really hadn't quite worked out yet. So it's kind of an awkward time for the crew of Deep Space Nine, and I think they also had some things working against them. The original ending included some Indiana Jones type rescue at the end that would have been a lot more exciting than just falling off some rocks and landing in Quark's bar. But a shout out to last episode we did, Michael Piller didn't like it for some reasons, and you're saying I keep talking about budgeting, and this was the biggest budgeted episode since the pilot. And then right around that time, they were told that, nope, you don't actually have any budget, even though this is supposed to be this kind of mid-season, not finale, but kind of like crescendo, and we're going to spend a lot of money on you, and that was the plan from the beginning. And nope, that just kind of fell out. And I think that's, we'll get into like some fun facts here about set designs they had ideas for, but it kind of made the episode doomed from the beginning, in my opinion. And another issue I have is the gameplay. I know it's them being in a giant board game, but it's like, what is it? You have this drinking antidote juice, and you're playing hopscotch, and you're crawling around a cave. It kind of just sucks. Like, it's just all over the place. And in the end, it's all a moot point because there was no danger in the first place. And to me, it pisses off an audience when you waste their time. And this is it was all a dream, quote unquote, situation we have here. There was no danger. There's really no tension. It's just fluff at this point. The Wadi never got any consequence for being these massive kind of douchebags. And I would have loved if we got like a chewing out from Cisco or Odo even, or even somebody like punching one of those Wadi's dudes in the goatee, but it's just nothing. It was kind of all very silly. And I guess that's the gamble you take when you make 23, 24 episodes a season. You know, they're not all going to be all-stars. Some are going to be a little clunky and a little awkward. That's been my review, but let's get into some fun facts about the episode. And one of the showrunners, Frederick Rappaport, commented that he had a very different conception of the game environment, and that for him, it was going to be an exterior setting with houses in a little village, but they were distorted, almost like a nightmare. And everything was angular and very weird. They made the rooms and hallways very childish and kind of added a creepy factor to it, which I do agree with, but they definitely didn't make it scary. I feel like they could have gone that route, and then they went the exact opposite. It went childish. Again, the first versions of the episode were going to be very complex, but had to be severely scaled back due to budget issues. Speaking of budget issues, Pillar even commented, I would have thought, based on my Next Generation experience, that midway point of the season, we'd all be in great shape. I knew Move Along Home was going to be hugely expensive, but I thought I'd have money to burn because we have done so many shows like this on the space station. So they tried to save money in those first 7 episodes, and it backfired big time. Another fun fact about the episode is that Terry Farrell's work on it, who plays Dax, prevented her from being in the TNG crossover episode Birthright Part 1, which was filmed around the same time. Siddig, who plays Bashir, guest starred instead, and Farrell commented, "I cried. I thought I should have fallen off the rock so I could have gone over there instead of Bashir randomly disappearing, because when we were filming Move Along Home, his character randomly disappeared and I was acting throughout the rest of it with Nana and Avery, and we all got caught up in together and missed that crossover." Which was like, yeah, good point. So, little fun fact. So if you watch the TNG rewatch and you get to Birthright, that's why. That's why Bashir's in it and not Farrell. Lastly, to close out this review, through our peak expertise and deep diving research skills in the bunker here on the East Coast of the United States, we have found out the origin of the Alamarane scene. J.O. Coker was a very famous showrunner who's behind Luke Cage and a bunch of other Netflix shows. Well, he was actually an intern on DS9 during the first season. And he said you would go to all these production meetings, you would read scripts here and there, because at the time, Star Trek was the only television show on the air, and actually one of the last ones to ever do this, that had open submission policy that anybody from anywhere could write a Star Trek script and send it into Paramount, and your script would get read. There are some famous sci-fi writers that did this, and TV personalities like Jane Eppenson got her start by selling a script there. Ron Moore got his start by selling a script there, and it was kind of this on-ramp for nerds who wanted to work in TV. And Coker goes on to explain that a lot of these episodes, they lost the script or they forgot who turned it in, and you would just kind of be sitting there sometimes watching DS9 and be like, oh, I wrote that, or I know somebody that wrote that, or even would get a random story credit here. And I mean, they're making 30 episodes a year, so they needed a lot of scripts from freelancers. One of the scripts that Coker wrote, and he was actually pitching this idea and wrote this idea and pitched this idea to Ira Stephen Burr, the famous showrunner of DS9, is that he wanted Cisco and Kira to kind of have to go through this obstacle to gain a lot of trust, to fight this alien race. And he was like, in his script, he was like, I'm going to have them play Hopscotch, and it'd be silly and funny, and the song will go along with it so that it alleviates the tension, but it's something that will get stuck in people's heads. And it was just a silly idea. And then due to that idea and that pitch to Ira Stephen Burr, he got locked out, he says, of DS9 because it was a dumb idea for a science fiction show. He was told, you can't have your first black captain playing hopscotch in this alien world, and what the F do you know? You're just an intern. Get the F out of here. And Coker was like, 8 months later, I'm home with my friends, and I was watching TV, watching DS9, and all of a sudden I start to recognize, oh my gosh, they're singing my song. Oh my gosh, Spencer for Hire, aka Avery Brooks, is now doing hopscotch. That's my idea. And I don't know if he ever got credit for it, and I don't think he did. He says on this interview, I don't think he ever got credit for it, but it's just kind of funny that he was like, get out of here, you don't know what you're talking about, freaking intern, shut up. And all of a sudden they're using his idea. Also really interesting on the insight into how they kind of created so many Star Trek episodes. I mean, like I said, 170 plus for DS9. I know there was the same ballpark for TNG. So they definitely had to use some freelancers. And it's kind of sad because now how do you get your start with writing scripts and submitting that and growing your career in Hollywood when you don't have that kind of on-ramp? I don't know. So if anybody's out there, I'd love to hear from you. Please reach out on social media if you are a screenwriter or in the Hollywood business, how you eventually break into that. But that has been our review of Move Along Home. And I guess we can move along home, Luna. All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you all so much for listening. It's been a lot of fun. And I'm glad to be back on my DS9 reviews, feeling fine. And I'm not going to fit. I don't know. I was going to keep rhyming and got really inappropriate. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Remember to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to across the Alpha Quadrant. It means a lot, grows the podcast exponentially. And so happy to be here. And please remember to take care of yourselves out there. Keep those mental crowns on, kings and queens. Like always, second star to the right. Straight on till morning.